There's one last entry in the selection menu that we've still to cover. It's the entry Select Similar. This has a sub-menu which changes its contents depending on whether we are selecting vertices, edges, or faces. We'll start with the vertex selection. Here, the first entry in the sub-menu is Normal. To use this option, we need to start by selecting one or more vertices. Blender will then select all other vertices whose vertex normal points in the same direction. The Last Stop panel has three parameters we can control. Type allows us to select any of the other vertex options rather than normal. In fact, the list given is an exact match for the remaining values in the Select Similar submenu, so we'll leave this parameter for now. The next parameter, Compare, allows us to change the comparison. Instead of equal, we can look for an edge with a length greater than or less than the length of the selected edge. The final parameter, Threshold, allows us to adjust the tolerance in angles between that of the initially selected vertex's normal and those that Blender is willing to select as a match. Since we're going to see exactly the same Last Stop panel for all the Select Similar submenu options, we'll not mention it again for the remainder of this video. The next entry is Amount of Adjacent Faces. Again, we start by selecting one or more vertices. Normally, it will be only one. And then Blender selects any vertex that is connected to the same number of faces as our selected vertex. Vertex Groups selects all the vertices that belong to the same vertex group as the initially selected vertex. If a vertex belongs to more than one group, the vertices of each of these groups will be selected. If the initial vertex does not belong to any vertex group, no other vertices will be selected. Amount of Connecting Edges requires an initial vertex to be selected. Blender will then select all other vertices that have the same number of edges. For example, if we select a vertex at the edge of a grid, it is connected to 3 edges, so this submenu option will then select all the other vertices connected to 3 edges. Notice that the corner vertices are not selected since they only have 2 connecting edges. Vertex Crease involves a subject for yet another future video. Face Regions is also available in the other selection modes, Edge and Face, and is probably most appropriately used when selecting faces. However, when in vertex selection mode, if we select enough vertices to define a reasonably complex set of faces, Blender will select any identical set of faces that exists within the mesh. Moving on to edge selection, the Select Similar submenu begins with Length. To use this, select an edge, and Blender will select any other edges of the same length. Direction selects all edges that are pointing in the same direction as the selected edge. Amount of Faces around an edge selects all edges that form part of the same number of faces as the selected edge. For example, an outer edge of a grid is connected to only one face, while all other edges are attached to 2 faces. So, starting with an outer edge, this option selects all the other outer edges. Face Angles selects any edge where the 2 faces it is connected to are at the same angle to each other as the faces of the initially selected edge. For example, every edge in a cube is connected to 2 faces that are at 90 degrees to each other. So, if we select one of the cube's edges, this option will select every other edge in the cube. However, if we adjust the shape of the cube by moving one of its edges, so that not every face is at right angles to its neighbor, when we select an edge and use face angles, not all of the cube's edges are selected. We'll have to ignore the remaining options in this submenu for now. Finally, face selection gives Select Similar yet another set of options. Material selects those faces that have been assigned the same material as the selected face. Area selects those faces with the same area as the selected face. Polygon Sides selects all other faces with the same number of sides as the selected face. Perimeter selects faces with the same length of perimeter as the selected faces. Normal selects faces with a face normal pointing in the same direction as the selected face. Coplanar selects faces that lie in the same plane as the selected face. Previously, we've seen that a curved mesh, such as a sphere, can have its shading adjusted to give a smoother look, rather than use the flat look that appears as default. When in edit mode, we can apply Shade Smooth to selected faces rather than the whole object. For example, in the torus shown here, we'll select several face loops and assign them the Shade Smooth option. The remaining faces are still assigned the default Shade Flat option. Flat or Smooth will select all faces with the same shading as an initially selected face. So, if we select one of the torus's faces with smooth shading, all the others' faces to which that shading option has been applied will also be selected. Freestyle face marks will have to wait until a later video, and face regions was covered earlier in the vertex selection segment.